Mic check. 1 2 1 2. What up, y'all? Let me make myself a little bigger. So, all right. I was having a conversation earlier with my boy Jacob, and we were talking about virtual assistants and how to train them. All right. This is a question I get a lot because I often talk about how my cleaning business, 95% of it is ran by my team. So it brought up the question of how do you train your VAs, and so I figured this content will be useful to, anybody else who's watching. So this is the process that I go about training my VAs. Now, a couple weeks ago, I made a video that focused a bit on creating SOPs. So I shared that video. So maybe you could look at this as a follow-up to that video, right? When it comes to hiring assistants, I think one of the major mistakes people make is that they hire people in the wrong order, right? Generally, when you hire somebody and it becomes chaotic, right? Like you hire the person and then essentially you're overseeing all their work, and whenever they make a mistake, you got to go fix it. So you're doing double work. You're prepping the work for them, and you also got to fix it. Sometimes just the fact that you got to do approvals, right? Just that alone, and you end up doing the same amount of work, except the difference is you're paying somebody else. The way to avoid that issue is, I think, there's a certain order to how things are supposed to be done. So most people tend to hire first, but the way I go about things is I actually systemize the business as much as I could first, and then I hire. So the way to remember this is easy way to remember this S.E.A.D, S-E.A.D. And so the order is systemize, eliminate, automate, and then delegate. And that D part is when you actually hire somebody. So anytime before their work you have to do. I've shared all this before in different videos in different ways, but just kind of show you how it all comes together, right? So the systemize phase from your business, right? You think of like a business function, marketing, sales, delivery, whatever. The systemize phase is when you start essentially creating a process map to kind of, just create a visual of what you do. So if I zoom out a little bit, get myself in the corner now, right? So here, this is, for example, let's go to the customer acquisition, right? So this is how we do our sales, our customer acquisition. Leads come in, we qualify the leads. Then there's this a diamond, which basically means what happened. Did the client say yes? Did they respond? Did they not? And based on that, next things happen. So if they didn't respond, they become unresponsive. Then now they start getting automatic follow-ups. If they responded but not interested, we automatically put them to a nurture list. And if they are interested, then the next step is we go and try to close them. And so with each of these different things, these are the different stages, right, in the process for how you do what you do. So one, this is the first tool you use to train your team members, right? Again, this is the S. We still got to get to the D, but this is the first tool. Because once you finish that tool, then you start looking at least the next thing I do is I look at, okay, what are the things here that I can remove or simplify, right? And so maybe, for example, if you're a cleaning business, you may say a walkthrough is a part of your process. Is there a way you can remove that from the process? Those are the things we look at when we start trying to simplify or remove. Just make the business easier to run. Then once you finish that, you ask yourself, well, what of this can I automate? So for example, when leads try to get qualified, all this is automated, right? That's the process. Now, under each of these, you're going to see this thing called SOPs. And so if we were to click one of them, you can actually see what we use and what we say in these various stages as we talk to these customers. So qualify message, this is what my team says, right, when we qualify them. And then the auto follow-up, so if I go back to this right here, I think I was here, right? So then did the customer respond? If the answer is no response, then this is how we follow up with them. If I click that, it takes you to the same document we use in, but the second half of it says, if they didn't respond in 24 hours, you send them this. If not 48, you will send them that, right? So all of this was documented. This is essentially what you're going to need to train your team. The thing is, your team is not just your team members or your VAs, but it's also your tools. It's also your software. So this part, the first half of this, technically there are no human beings involved. And so when it comes to the systemize, eliminate, automate, so we have tools doing all this, right? Automatically being followed, automatically getting messages. And then from there, if somebody responds interested, then what's left, the process of attempting to close, is when we now introduce team members to do these very specific things. So then the next question is, well, what do they do, right? Now that they know what the job is, how do they know what to actually do, right? And so within each of these, we have links that actually showcases what they're supposed to do. So for example, if I were to go back to this document, we're in here. So with the attempt to close, we have a few different discount codes that we've used historically. So if I'm the team member, I could come here and see the various discount codes we have and the scenarios where it makes sense to give them and what makes sense, right? So this is what it is. We have a couple of FAQs where based on questions customers ask, we'll know how to answer them the team will know how to answer them to help close that particular client, right? And as they're doing manual follow-ups, these are some specific scripts they can use. So a few different things, right? So ultimately, you have the flow, right? The process map of what they're supposed to do. Then you have the assets. These are essentially SOPs. You have the asset they're supposed to use for them to help successfully do what they need to do. So let's look at the same thing from a customer delivery standpoint, right? Client book, the next step is assign cleaners, training the team member on how to assign cleaners. So one, if that's something you need to do, right, that's something you create an SOP for or a document for. In my case, the process of assigning cleaners is not a complicated one. So all we give our team is just a guide for here's how we pay people. So when you're assigning them, these are the things you need to consider when it comes to assigning them and what percentages we're going to offer them for each of these jobs, right? Same thing applies once the job is interested and booked, we update the job on BookingKoala, right? And so these are our notes and the format notes we use. That's the tool we use, right? But other, whatever tool anybody uses, they can do the same thing, right? And we also have concierge message we send out a couple of days prior to try to get photos from that client. As soon as you click it, they know exactly what that message sound like and look like. And then proceeding here, the photo gets sent. If the answer is yes, move on. If the answer is no, right, then we go back and reach out again to the client, follow up just to make sure that they send it. And then the day of the job, blah, 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 et cetera, right? So I say all that to say, with all those different steps of the business functions that you have, those become your assets, those become your SOPs, and those become part of your SOP library. And then from there, when you find your team members, and I'm obviously oversimplifying, but when you find your team members, the way you train them is actually by giving them these systems, by giving these to them and tell them, just run this, right? And the smart VAs or the smart team members are going to tell you, hey, I've been doing the thing you told me, but I tweaked it up a little bit and this got a little better, right? And so this is a living, breathing document that changes over time. But to answer the general question of how you train, this is how I do it. Now, somebody may say, well, what about creating SOPs for tools, right? I generally don't create SOPs for tools because tools change. And so generally, if I need to, I'll find videos that the tool provider provides that I can give to the cleaners or who the team members so they can follow their tutorials so that if the tool changes or the button position changes, I don't have to keep that going. So I'm only creating SOPs for things that are very specific and crucial to completing these steps. So when it comes to SOPs, one thing to think about is better that they're simple and that they're short. And also if you can have as little SOPs as possible, those are the only ways that you're going to get them to be used. So hope this helped. This is how I go about training my team members to essentially run the business and make decisions in my absence. All right. If you have any questions, let me know. Peace.